Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 45. I think audiences get too comfortable and familiar in today's movies. They believe everything they're hearing and seeing. I like to shake that up. Christopher Nolan.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to download your free film audiobook from audible.com. And today's show is sponsored by USC Film School's only online course, Directing the Actor with Nina Foch. Head over to indiefilmhustle.com/USC to download that amazing course. So today, guys, our guest of honor is Todd Brown from twitchfilm.com. Todd and I have known each other for probably going about 12 years now. We first met when I was promoting my short film Broken back in the early days of promoting Broken, and he was just done launching his site, twitchfilm.com, maybe a year or two earlier than that. He was a big fan of Broken and then afterwards of Red Princess Blues and some of my other films. So of course we became fast friends. So he's amazing guy. He's seen more movies in the last 10 years, especially independent movies, than anybody else I know. He's gone to thousands of film festivals for his website and has seen everything from any walk of life you could imagine. So he's basically an expert on independent film and seeing independent film, finding new talent, and exposing new talent to the masses. Todd recently joined forces with XYZ Films, which is a distribution company, and their first big hit was The Raid. If you guys haven't seen The Raid, I will leave links for it in the show notes. It kind of put action movies on their heels when it came out a few years ago. It's just a nonstop romp, to say the least. It's really great. And Todd was very instrumental in finding that movie and getting it to the audiences here in the States and around the world for that matter. So please sit back and relax and listen to two film geeks geek out my interview with Todd Brown from twitchfilm.com. Todd, man, thanks so much for taking the time out. I know you're a very busy man. I know you're in Argentina right now at a film festival, so thanks for taking the time out.
Yeah, of course. And yes, I'm down at the bottom of the world.
How is it? What's the weather down there?
It's actually not bad. It's about the same as it is home in Toronto. So today it got to just under 20 degrees Celsius. So that's like high 60s in Fahrenheit.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's been sunny. People are nice. There's a lot of beef.
I've heard.
Yeah, the rumors are true.
So you and I met. God, it's going over 10 years now that we've met each other. Back in the days when I was making my rounds with Broken.
Yeah, that's right. You sent me some materials, and I think what was it, a short film or a proof of concept that you had done?
It was a short film. It was a short film with a whole bunch of extras and stuff on it, and you were one of the early champions of Broken, so I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm obviously happy to do it, or I wouldn't have done it. But it's also, I mean, you were kind of a little bit ahead of the curve on that stuff, where those sorts of kind of proof of concept things online are driven a ton of movies over the last little while to actually get them made.
Right, exactly. We were a little ahead of time on a few things with the, with the 3 hours of behind the scenes kind of film school stuff on a DVD and self distribution and kind of crowdsourcing. We were already crowdsourcing back in 2004, 2005 before everybody's doing it now, But yeah, it was really interesting, and I do appreciate you being that early one of the early champions of Broken, and then after that, you really helped me out with Red Princess Blues and a couple of my other films.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about twitchfilm, twitchfilm.com. It's been going now 11 years, 12 years?
Yeah, we're into the 12th year at this point. Which is an eternity in online time.
You're like the AT&T of like you're forever. It takes. I don't even know what company's been around forever. You're like the Disney, sir. You're like the Disney of online.
Yeah, and it kind of morphs and changes. We're in the middle of a fairly significant redevelopment right now, where I want to bring some other stuff into it because, we've effectively operated it the same way for that entire lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
And just the internet is a different place now than it was then.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something, I think we're about the same vintage. I'm 42.
Yep. I like that. Same vintage.
I grew up I lived the transition to the internet. Like my elementary school was like in that first wave of getting computer labs.
Oh yeah. What was your first computer? What was your first computer there in the computer
that I
labs?
owned?
No, in the computer lab.
Commodore PETs.
Oh, you too. Oh my God. I had a Commodore PET as well. I was in 4th grade when I saw it and I was like, what? It was just such an odd thing to me. I know we were going to sound like such old people, but I mean, it was such an odd thing to see this thing. And I never really grasped what a computer could do for me until literally I got into college. Because before then,
I'm the same way. I was like, I loved them. I knew that.
But it was all Microsoft Word and like it was all DOS. But when I saw the Mac, that's when at least for me, I was like, oh
no! My current computer is a Mac, and it's the first Mac I have ever owned. I was one of the guys like stripping down boards and like fixing jump settings and stuff and all that by hand.
Oh,
I loved being able to kind of get into the box.
But you drank the Kool-Aid now.
Yeah, I have. I'm fully out now. It didn't take very long once I switched. But kind of growing up in that age, I had a bunch of friends who were into self-publishing. Mm-hmm. And when I was in high school, I started writing really heavily about music for just kind of hand photocopied zines and stuff that friends of mine were running and that were being distributed in record stores and things. And, when I was 18, I got published nationally for the first time. And it became something I toyed with the idea of doing it, trying to do it for a living until I decided I really didn't like working for editors, but I enjoyed the process of writing. So I wrote about music for a long time. Mm-hmm. Ran my own little record label for a couple of years. My sister is a doctor and she backed me on it and I spent all her money.
That's what the sisters are for, sir.
Yeah, pretty much. She was good about it. I paid her back eventually.
Okay.
It took a few years. And then as that stuff was winding down, I had a friend who from college who kind of became the bridge to another guy who I knew from college, but we weren't tight. But he was starting a film site, and they knew that I had been writing for a long time, and that even though I'd been writing about music, that I was also a film geek. So they asked if I'd be interested in writing for him. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a couple of years, and it became a little bit tense and I wouldn't say contentious, but you could see it starting to go down that road, just in terms of taste and in terms of,
I've never
I'm more prolific than he is, and so I ended up being very much a dominant voice on the site, and people assuming it was mine. It becomes this bruised ego thing.
I've never heard of film geeks fighting like that before. It's unheard of.
But we both saw it coming before it arrived, and so there was a moment where. I don't even remember what the conversation started as, but John was like, I feel kind of like we've been pulling in different directions a bit lately. And as soon as he said that, I was like, you know what? If you're feeling like that, I've been feeling like that. Now's the time where we just cut it. And you go your way and you keep doing your own thing. I'm going to go my way and I'm going to found my own thing. And we'll part as we're still friends and wish each other well. And away we go.
Cool.
Which is what ended up happening. And I launched Twitch. The name literally means nothing. It was just a word that I thought sounded interesting.
Right. Great marketing. Great branding, sir.
Yeah, I know. It's a miracle that I've survived as long as I have in life. But it was really only just an outlet for myself because at that point I'd been writing for a really long time and I didn't know what I'd do if I wasn't. And so I just wrote about stuff that I thought was interesting. I always assumed that kind of the ceiling would be super low. And I ended up hitting a niche that nobody else was touching. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of all spiraled and grew organically from there. And literally everything else that I'm doing in the industry has happened because of Twitch.
And, when I met you, it was like 2005. So you opened Twitch in 2004, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like you were kind of still brand new when I hit you up. So what else are you doing now in the industry? We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Well, Twitch within about the first year and a half led to me doing some festival programming. That's when kind of simultaneously I was approached by the Fantasia Festival in Montreal, and I approached Fantastic Fest after their first year because you could see that something cool was going on there.
It's pretty cool. It is a pretty cool festival.
And when I did that, I was working a day job that left me very flexible with my time and paid really well, so I didn't need to get paid.
That's always nice.
Yeah. So instead, I asked both festivals to give me travel budget, and they started sending me around to the different film markets around the world.
Oh, how cool.
Which for me was travel and kind of a little bit of exoticism and all of this stuff, but resulted in me having a chance to learn the actual mechanics and the business of independent film from that end, without the pressure of having to monetize it. You know, I could just be around it and get to know people. And for the festivals, they had kind of me out there on the ground scouting and chasing stuff down for them. So it worked out really well for both of us. Yeah.
So basically, you're at a film market, not with the pressure of having to sell a movie or make money. You're just there absorbing information.
Yeah, I was out there kind of in the screenings. I was kind of handing out cards to the different sales agents, getting to know, you know, how the different companies worked, what sort of films different people were interested in, what the different distribution models were, who the significant players were. And that was right. It was right before the home video collapse. So I was doing the market circuit while that was going on, and you could see how the shifts in business model were affecting things and how technology was affecting things really directly. And you could see who was adapting in the right ways and who wasn't.
Blockbuster. Sorry.
Yeah, that's one. How much would they like to have the opportunity to buy Netflix back?
For $2 million, or like $5 million, $20 million? It was something like really small.
It was really small.
I always tell people, like, don't be that Blockbuster. Don't be. Anytime you have a business, don't be Blockbuster. You always got to look around the corner, and even if you're the big boy on the totem pole, because oh my God, they were like they were huge.
Yeah,
and they just completely dropped the ball.
Yeah, nobody took it seriously until it was too late. There's an entire tier of the industry that's gone now. When I started going to the American film market, every single suite in the Lowe's was full from top to bottom, plus 3 floors at the L'Amerigo next door. When you go now, I mean, it's happening right now.
Right.
So I haven't been this year. I wasn't last year, but the year before that, when I was there, the L'Amerigo was completely empty. The top 2 floors of the Lowe's were empty. The bottom floor of the Lowe's was empty, and there were empty suites scattered all the way through. So that's like 45, 50 offices gone.
So why do you say? So what do you say? Why do you say that? What do you think that happened?
It's all of those companies. Principally, those are the companies that were producing direct-to-video content.
Got it. And they have no idea how to. And they didn't switch or figured it out.
Yeah, it's adapt or die. It's very Darwinian.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting. I haven't been to AFM. I'm going next week to AFM for my first one, and I've heard, of course. I've talked to a lot of people, and I've heard of what goes on there. But it's interesting to see that perspective that there used to be so many more companies, and they just started to slowly go away because they can't adapt to.
Yeah, it
change.
Wasn't even slow. I mean, when it really hit, it was 3 years.
Well, yeah, which is a bullet in this industry without question.
Yeah.
So you were saying?
Yeah. But while out doing that, I ended up meeting a guy who is now one of my business partners, who at the time was working for an agency in LA, in their independent sales division. And I covered a couple of his films, which were wildly divergent films. One of them was a documentary about a Filipino transvestite, and one of them was a really grimy, nasty horror film.
Nice.
And I think that divergence and the fact that my name popped up covering both of them is what made me initially stand out to Nate. And so we got to know each other a little bit. And then the company that he worked for bought Bloody Disgusting, the horror website.
Yeah, I remember.
And at the time, they foolishly thought that there was money to be made in online media. So they tried to buy me as well, and I wasn't interested. But Nate and I got to be friends, and one day he just said to me, look, why don't you he's like, you're out finding this stuff all the time, and I'm trying to sell it. Like, if you find something cool, why don't you just bring it to me, and we'll do it together, and we'll just kind of split it.
That's a nice deal.
Yeah, and I'd never thought of going that way before, of actually doing it, but it's like I just kind of hit the critical mass of knowledge that I was starting to feel confident in that world. And a few months later, while scouting stuff for festivals, I came across two different things, an animated film and a live action film, where I kind of looked at them, and they were both obviously really good, but I could see that they were about to make some really big errors. So I wrote both companies kind of cold. And just said, oh, we'd already been talking about other stuff because I'd been covering them on Twitch, but in terms of business, it was cold. And I just reached out and I said, look, I don't want to speak out of turn or anything like that. If I'm wrong, just tell me to shut up and piss off and go away, and I won't be offended. That's fine. But it looks to me like you're about to do kind of this and this and this. And if you do that, here's what's going to happen, and you're probably going to leave $400,000 or $500,000 on the table. And you need somebody with a really particular skill set who can do kind of this list of things for you. And I've got that skill set, and you should just hire me.
Nice.
And both of them did. And then I immediately turned around and called Nate, because I am not a contract guy, and I never will be.
Right.
And so I just called him up and left a message and said, look, were you serious? Because I've got these two things. They both want to work with me. And I need somebody who can handle this whole other end of it. And he said yes, and that was the start of us working together. And that was also the start of us working with Gareth Evans, because one of those movies was Marintow, the movie he did before he did The Raid.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, we hit a good one right out of the gate.
Yeah, you hitched your wagon to a good train there.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I thought you were, I know you did a little bit behind the scenes stuff with festivals and stuff like that, but I didn't know do you handle distribution now, or do you like?
Well, yeah, no, I work with we're called XYZ Films. The company's up to 14 people now.
Oh wow.
And I work on the acquisition and development side, kind of tracking either independent projects that are already going or the stuff that's about to bring them in, help with the development end of things. And then we are both a production company ourselves, and then we are also a sales agency.
Wow. And this is you and Nate.
Well, Nate, what I didn't know is when I was kind of out having those initial conversations with kind of those first films, Nate and two of his buddies, two of his best friends from when he was in the UCLA producers program, were all in the process of quitting their jobs to found this new company together, which is XYZ. And at the time, it was founded on the back of a development deal that they had with Time Life, where they had a 1-year exclusive window to just mine the Time Life archive of every magazine they've ever owned for articles that could supply the basis for stories.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, in those days, XYZ was initially founded on the belief that it was going to be a development company. And I joined about 9 months into the life of the company, I think. So I'm not original with them, but within the first year, as they quickly realized that development takes a really long time and is very expensive, and we have to make some money while it's happening.
Right. Now, are they based in LA or are they based in Toronto?
They're based in LA.
Okay.
I'm still based in Toronto, though.
As you should be, sir. Stay out of this town as long as you can.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy where I am, other than in February and March.
I've been there at that time. It's not fun. Yeah. So with Twitch, man, what made you focus on international and independent films? Because that is your focus, right? That's like kind of what Twitch does. Yeah,
to a large degree, and we're not like, we're certainly not anti-Hollywood. There's a lot of Hollywood films that I love, and there's a lot of Hollywood stuff that we cover. Part of it is that part of it is just that I bore easily. And I couldn't get excited about being kind of the fifth guy to review this movie or
Avengers, right.
Just covering the same stuff that everybody else was covering for the sake of covering it.
Right.
And the way we laid our boundaries down, it also left me really.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Versatile. I mean, like you talk to, I don't want to name him just because I don't know if he wants to be named in this way, but
Sure.
the online film journalism community is very small, and especially if you kind of restrict it to the guys that have been around. I consider myself in the second wave. Like, I'm not Harry Knowles or Nick Nunziata or those guys.
Sure.
But I'm in the next block, and I talked to some of the horror guys, and like they've said to me, a few of them have said kind of outright, and they're like, "Man, you are so call yourself a horror writer." Because he's like, as soon as we call ourselves a horror brand, we have to cover all of it. And a lot of it's shit. But you have to be comprehensive if that's what you've decided to call yourself. Where for me, if a bunch of stuff in one particular subset of kind of the world is kind of shitty, I just stop covering it. And I go and I look for other stuff that's more interesting.
What a concept.
Yeah. It's left me, it's nice. It's completely self-serving.
No, but that's something unique to Twitch because, I've done my rounds with every website that has to do with film journalism and film covering films and stuff, promoting my movie. So I know the group that you're talking about. And you always stood out. You always stood out to me, at least, because I was like, man, he's really covering cool stuff. It's just different. It's just different.
And I'd like to think that kind of as a piece of unconscious branding, what it did as people realized that that's how we operated is, well, it meant we didn't fit into a clean genre niche. What it meant to people is that if we were covering it, it's because we really liked it. And it became a bit of a stamp of quality in a way that other sites aren't necessarily.
Correct. Yeah. No. And I did that. I got it when you guys reviewed my films, and then I proudly would put your review or a quote that you did on one of my movies, and it held weight. People are like, oh, Twitch, and then as the years have gone on, that weight has become heavier and heavier. So you have much more. Which
is something that I still find weird, honestly.
I know. It's funny because, before it, I knew you, like I said, I knew you a year out, so we were both kind of starting our journeys in different sides, in different worlds, but we were both starting our journey in this weird film world. And as we've both kind of grown in our own ways, it's so funny that I go back to I was reading the review that you did on Broken and on Red Princess the other day, and I was just like, wow, this is cool. But then I start seeing how much more weight that your name starts, I've seen you on posters and stuff.
Yeah.
It's I'm like, but that's Todd. I know Todd.
Yeah. My family keeps me humble.
Yeah. Tell me
my wife finds it really odd because she's completely outside the film industry. She loves documentary and stuff, but is not a film geek by any stretch. She's a journalist. And when she comes with me to industry stuff, she finds it really interesting. We're like, I mean, you've done these things, you know what it's like, where everybody's always like, so who are you? What are you here with? She's like, I'm just watching stuff. Yeah. Well, what's your connection? How do you know? She's like, oh, I'm Todd Brown. So and she says the conversation's changed. And I'm like, that's so strange. And then I talked to my son who's 14 and to this date refuses to watch The Raid specifically because I'm involved with it and therefore it can't be any good.
That's brilliant. My wife is the same way. My wife is in social work, and when she got to LA, she's like, I can't go to these parties anymore. Like every time you go, it's like, so who are you? What do you do? This and that. She's like,
it's exhausting.
It's just
and that's a big chunk of why. I mean, there's other practical realities why I can't move out of Toronto.
Sure.
But even if I could, man, the weather's great in LA, but I don't think I want to live that lifestyle. It's in that. It's very fishbowl. It's very self-referential.
Yes.
And you need people outside of the industry to help you keep perspective.
I've been here for 8 years now because I originally started in Florida. So when I got here, it's at first it's like, oh, the streets are paved with gold, because if you're a film geek, this is Mecca. Like, everywhere you turn, there's Warner Brothers, there's Disney, there's Paramount, there's like 15 post houses, there's 15, they're shooting something on the street. It was so exciting. But then you start going to these parties and you start getting these, and it's all the same. Any party you go to about in Hollywood or in LA, it's all about the business. Like, no one discusses anything else. Yeah. It's like, and that's what my wife was like, this is just, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. And it's that vibe very much when you go to the markets and stuff too. Like, I don't know anybody who actually enjoys going to Cannes. And it's kind of a weird thing to gripe about because it's like you're spending a week on the French Riviera and this is your job.
Yeah. Or Sundance, same thing in Sundance. Yeah.
But I mean, every market has its own vibe and its own energy, but in Cannes, man, when things are going badly, or if the weather turns a little bit because there's more people there than there's actually infrastructure and capacity for,
right?
You can't have a conversation with somebody without them looking over your shoulder to see who else is there and could they potentially make more money by talking to that person than they are by talking to you.
Wow.
It's really weird. It's exhausting.
And this all started with a little website.
Yep.
Now, how is it to run a global cinema empire, sir? Cinema news empire, excuse me.
Mostly I do it because it's fun. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, you're a film geek at heart. At the end of the day,
yeah. When I get bored with it, is the day that I'll stop.
Now, how did you fall in love with film?
That's an interesting question. And there's a few different ways of answering it. One, as I am kind of a prototypical geeky kid, and I grew up in the peak of the video era, and I had a couple of friends that we would just every week we'd be at the video store doing something. My friend Steve and I, when we were young, we had these stretches where we would kind of theme rent. And so we did one binge where we watched nothing but movies starring former professional athletes.
I would have loved to be in those.
That was actually a good run because that was like,
oh no, what They Live.
They had just come out. Yeah, They Live.
Oh, Stone Cold.
Had a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, Howie Long was in a few, although Howie's were usually pretty shitty.
Bubba Smith. Don't forget Bubba Smith of Police Academies.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, we kind of did that run, and then we had another run where we did. If it wasn't long enough to be on 2 tapes, we wouldn't rent it. Which I think is how I saw the Godfather movies the first time. It's definitely how I saw The Mission for the first time.
Yep. Oh man.
So you'd end up with these great things. And then I had an English teacher. I think he was my grade 9 English teacher. Who I remember really clearly. We were doing Romeo and Juliet. And Mr. Shingen, he was this German guy. He was the head of drama in the high school as well. His intro just completely, he made so many like 14-year-old girls angry when he introduced the play. He's like, everybody looks at Romeo and Juliet as this is kind of the classic romance. It's like, this is not a romance. This is a couple of 15-year-olds who want to get laid.
That's pretty much it.
And kind of in that moment, the penny dropped in that kind of nothing is sacred, and we're taught to a certain degree to kind of, or were taught at least at that point, that kind of art and culture is this thing that's out there somewhere and up a bit. And Shungen was the first time where I understood that things were actually really gritty. And even the absolute masters, like even Shakespeare, you could criticize him.
Of course.
Even Shakespeare wasn't perfect at everything. And that popular opinion, just because people had said this is what it is over and over and over again, that's not necessarily true. And I learned a lot about critical thinking from Rudy Shingen.
Interesting.
He was amazing. And then my English teacher the next year, she gave us our independent study assignment that year, where she's like, we do too much on Canadian and British writers in Canada. She's like, you're going to pick a playwright or an author, an American one, and that's going to be your independent study. And so I went to her and I kind of made the case. I'm like, Does a screenwriter count?
Oh, nice, nice.
It's similar enough. And she went for it. She's like, yeah, she's like, if you can get some of the actual scripts beyond just watching the movies, and you're going to apply kind of the same rigor and look for kind of the same sort of thematic stuff. Yes, it does.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And so I was a huge Monty Python fan. And so I did my independent study that year on Terry Gilliam.
Oh, wow. That must have been awesome.
And I watched Brazil about 15 or 20 times that year in every different cut of it that existed at that time.
Right. There's 100 cuts of that day. It's almost as bad as Blade Runner.
Yeah. Well, my first time seeing Brazil, my first viewing experience was the horrible broadcast cut.
Oh, goodness. It's like watching Scarface on broadcast.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is where I really started. Brazil is the movie that made me understand what film could be.
Interesting.
You know, and the versatility of it, and how comedy can be a mask for so many other things, and how sci-fi allows for a level of satire and political awareness. You know, I never saw that movie. I didn't see that movie theatrically for like 15 years after that. And then seeing it on the big screen the first time, still finding there's an incredible amount of information hidden in that film.
Yeah. Well, it's Terry Gilliam. He is a genius.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah. So that's kind of what
got you into this whole thing.
Yeah, to a large degree. And Blade Runner is kind of probably a half step behind Brazil, but Brazil is the movie for me.
Blade Runner is probably that movie for me. I mean, there's a lot of other movies I love, but when I saw Blade Runner, I was like, oh, okay. I see this now. I get it.
It's incredible how well it stands up to. It's still gorgeous.
It's like they just released that Blu-ray version of it a few years ago that they remastered everything, and they updated a couple of the effects with Ridley's help and everything. And it's just, and it's a 83, right? 83, 80,
yeah, something
82.
like that.
It was 82, 83 movie, and it killed
the Shaw Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. It still holds up today, like right now. You could put it up against, and I would argue it's much better than almost anything being made today with all the VFX and stuff, but that's a whole other conversation. So let me ask you a question. What does a film have to catch your eye? As someone who looks at films and are looking for films for your company and for Twitch.
It's a nebulous kind of answer, but for me, it all boils down to voice.
Okay.
You know, does this author have a voice and a point of view that's distinctive? Mm-hmm. I'm not one of these guys who buys into everything has to be original, quote unquote, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of bullshit. I have no problems at all with a formula movie if you understand the formula and how to work it. Mm-hmm. But it's all, you talk to literary theorists and people, and like, depending who you talk to, it's most say that there's really only something like 5 stories in the world.
Right. Exactly.
And then it's all variations, and it's all about how you tell the story and what your take on it is.
Your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the biggest thing to me. There's a lot of stuff that I can forgive. But you've got to know what you are. If you're trying to tell somebody else's story, if you're trying to pander to an audience, that's where it all starts to fall apart. So I think it requires a certain amount of, self-awareness and self-knowledge as a filmmaker, and confidence.
Right. And I've been to millions of festivals, so I've seen a lot of indie films. And you're right. The people who really kind of catch your eye are people who have a distinct flavor of their own, their voice, as you said. And it's hard sometimes because a lot of filmmakers are so in the chase of trying to make it that they're like, well, I'm going to do you remember when Pulp Fiction came out, how many ripoffs
Oh yeah.
Of
I mean,
Pulp.
that's still happening. There's still people trying to Nick Tarantino style.
Oh, I know, yeah, and you can't. It's just not possible. It's not a possibility. You can't. It's something you can't do. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody else, Coppola stole from Kurosawa, and everyone steals from everybody. But you can't steal their voice. Like, I can't go make a Coppola movie. I can't go make a Scorsese film. And God, how many people have tried to make a Scorsese film, over the years? It's something you have to find in yourself as a filmmaker, as a voice, and it's something I'm finding as myself, as a filmmaker as well. So that's a great answer. Great answer.
Yeah, it's usually some kind of sort of kernel of something that's really personal. And I find when you meet people, and it's not about experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, it isn't. You can have a 20-year-old that does it.
Yeah, I had a chance this year leading into the Toronto Film Festival. They asked me to come. They do this boot camp for Canadian filmmakers to kind of prep them for what the festival is and how to kind of take advantage of it and navigate it. And so they had a few panels of different people from different aspects of the industry. And then they had this guy named Andrew Cividino, who did a film called Sleeping Giant that premiered in Cannes and then was about to have its Canadian premiere in Toronto. And his unit publicist is somebody that I've known for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a very no bullshit, been around the block several times woman, and she was like raving about Andrew to me. And as soon as he sat down on stage and started talking, I was like, oh, this is why. Like, as soon as he started talking about what he was doing and why he was doing it, you're just like, oh, this guy is real, like 100% real. Like he's not flashy, he's not showy, he's not being pushy about it, but he had this real centered groundedness. He knew who he was.
And that's so hard to find in any realm of life.
Yeah. But it comes it comes through in his film.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like Xavier Dolan. I mean,
right.
As a teenager, was one of those guys. He knew who he was, and I don't think he made those early movies trying to impress anybody. He was just trying to express something about kind of his own youth.
Yeah, like Scorsese, his early films were all about his youth and all about his experience. So I know you get approached probably about 1,000 times a day by filmmakers wanting you to promote their films, and review their films on their website. How should a filmmaker approach a site like yours or any kind of media outlet like this?
I mean, first rule: be polite.
I know, it's stupid as I know.
You'd be amazed how many people aren't. Second thing, kind of be thorough and be logical. There's certain baseline information that we need. Mm-hmm. And if you write me and say, I've got this thing, and throw a couple of vague details and write me back if you want to know more about it. Yeah. I'm not going to write you back. Right. I'm just not, because I get between 400 and 500 emails a day if I'm not and that's like the bottom end if I'm not answering and kind of engaged. Right.
And not including Facebook messages, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And Twitter messages and stuff.
Am I going to go back to you to seek out and kind of up my email volume? No, I'm not. I'm just not. And so, make sure you include your title.
I know, it's funny, but it's true. I've seen it.
Include a little synopsis. Include a link to a teaser. If you don't have visual content yet, I am categorically not going to cover it because everything is hypothetical.
Correct.
Yep. There's got to be something tangible. It's, as passionate as you might be about it, as important as it might be to you, as confident as you are that you're going to make something good, 20-year-old independent filmmaker making his debut micro-budget film, that's not news.
Not anymore.
It's like, it just isn't.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of those people. And of those hundreds of movies at any given time, probably 5 of them are going to be good.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. So, you gotta show me something. If you're not ready to do that, just hold off, keep your powder dry until you're actually ready.
Right.
And if you haven't heard back from me or nothing's come up in 3 or 4 days, maybe send a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
But sending a bombardment, that doesn't help. That breaks the be polite rule from the beginning.
Right. Right.
It's not everything's going to be for everybody, and that's part of the process. That's part of the creative process. Is once you make something and put it out into it on a certain level, it stops being yours.
Mm-hmm.
And if my feeling about it and my opinion of it is thanks but no, that's fair and that's valid. And on a certain level, you're going to have to accept that. And if you can't accept just the fact that somebody isn't picking up your story, man, wait until reviews and stuff start coming back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to be aware that there's an interplay that happens here and be part of that.
Yeah, I remember when I approached you, because I get asked a lot about, like, how do you, how'd you get so many reviews? How many did you get this or that? And I was like, well, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. I think you're right. I sent you, if I remember, this is 10 years ago, but I'm almost positive this is what I probably did. I probably wrote you a very short, concise email. Yep. I had a link. I had a name. Obviously, the name of my movie was probably in that first little paragraph, and who I was and what I was doing, and a couple little details about the movie. I'm like, here's a trailer and here's our website.
Yeah.
And that was it. And you went to saw this.
And that's the best way to do it. Like, honestly, unless I'm somewhere where the internet is not working, mm-hmm. Which happens these days, where mm-hmm. I'll get email but can't access even YouTube. Mm-hmm. But if somebody just sends me, here's a sentence, here's my synopsis, here's my trailer, I will look. I literally look at every single one of those trailers.
Right.
I absolutely do. But just, yeah, concise is good.
Yeah, concise. Yeah, because and that's the thing I always try. I did a whole episode on indie film marketing spamming. Like they just the people that just keep shouting at you constantly, promote my movie, promote my Kickstarter.
And those people do stand out for bad reasons. That doesn't get you any goodwill.
Right. And that's the thing. And people don't get that. And like, you have to be polite. You have to understand, someone like you who has a very old and successful website, it's a standard in what you do. And, I'm sure Harry gets thousands of, Harry Knowles probably gets thousands of emails a day and all this kind of stuff. And these kind of guys, you've got to be very short because they don't have the time to do it, to look at it all. So what am I going to look at the I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read 5 pages. I'll read 2 sentences. And if there's a link, I might click on it. If that 2 sentences,
Yeah, for me, it's I immediately look for the link. I'll kind of read the synopsis, look for the link, click the link.
10 seconds.
Yeah, pretty much. If that teaser shows me, okay, you're an actual filmmaker, then I'll go back and I'll read the rest of the email.
Right. Yeah, it's all about, show me, don't tell me.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So now, do you have any, I guess we kind of covered, any advice that you could give filmmakers to get attention for their films, which is pretty much what we just discussed? Yeah,
and the biggest thing these days, if you want to prove to people that you can make something, you kind of got to make something.
Yeah.
There's too much noise. Pitching doesn't work anymore. Like, even for us as an established production company, we've been on a run, and this will break at some point, but so far we've never made a proof of concept and not made the movie. Mm-hmm. But to go in, with a mood board, you're showing people whether or not you have taste, but that doesn't tell me whether or not you can actually make it.
Right.
If you come in with a rip reel, you're showing me that you can cut, but you're not showing me that you can shoot.
Right. Or tell a story. Right.
Yeah. And with the tools that are available to people these days, there are an awful lot of other people that are coming to me with stuff that shows me whether or not they can shoot. Mm-hmm. And so you're under equipping yourself. You kind of have to have something.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing. And it's like these days, like, seriously, I've seen movies shot on iPhones that look pretty great.
If done right. Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to light them right. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know how to capture and handle the material. But you can shoot high def video on a phone. You can shoot really good looking video on an SLR that you can get for a couple $100. You can edit it. My 14-year-old son is learning the entire Adobe suite of software in high school right now in grade 9. Of
course he is. And that probably just drives you and me crazy because we didn't have that when we were that young.
Yeah.
I would have killed for that.
But this is the reality of the world that you're in, where all these tools exist.
Right.
And if you're not using them, it means you're competing with a whole lot of people who are. And you're starting from a disadvantage.
Yes, and to add to that, I always kind of promote and like preach about learning how to market yourself, learning how to brand yourself, learning how to get people to look at you and get above the noise. And obviously, you need a good product, but a lot of times, even a good product, you know, like I was talking to someone the other day, is like a good script in a drawer doesn't do you any good.
Yeah,
you know, a good short that just sits on your website and no one ever goes to see it is no good to you. You have to go out there and market it and promote it. And that's what I've done.
In the indie world right now, in my opinion, the absolute kings of that are Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson, the guys that made Resolution and Spring.
Say those names one more time.
Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson. Their first feature was called Resolution, premiered in Tribeca. The second feature is one that we produced called Spring that premiered in the Vanguard program in Toronto.
Spring?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like Spring is like if you take Richard Linklater's Before Sunrise and make it into a monster movie, and that's Spring.
Jesus, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's 100% true to both of those impulses. But I knew Aaron and Justin online, and they've got a very distinct persona. They travel and kind of function as a double act where they have very clearly defined roles. They rehearse their Q&As. When they're at festivals, they know exactly what they want to accomplish. When Resolution played in Toronto After Dark, they had this whole patter down, and they planted a couple of their actors in their audience to just feed these ridiculous questions to them on stage, while also taking real ones from the audience.
Sure.
But they delivered, like they understood that they are part of the show as much as the film is.
That's brilliant.
And they've absolutely created this thing around themselves, and it's all incumbent. It only works if they put the effort and the work into creating good scripts and creating good projects. But they understand that the job of filmmaking now isn't just about making the movie. It's everything from start to finish. You have to be out there and hands-on, and you have to find that line. Like, there's nothing that's more obnoxious than somebody who's always pitching and always shilling.
Sure.
So it's finding that balance between, you have to be honest and you have to be true to who you are and you have to be authentic. But you got to be prepared at kind of at any time. When something comes up, you've got an opportunity to make an impression, and you need to make that impression, and it needs to be the right one. And it's really simple stuff. Like, as I'm traveling around, everywhere I go, on my phone, I have the trailers and the proof of concepts and the in-progress reels and, the mood reels from every project that is either in process of delivering or in process of development with me at all times, because I never know who I'm going to meet.
Right. That's what?
That's like 30 things on my phone right now that are kind of in those stages. So it's like, something comes up, like, I'm not being pushy and stuff, but if something comes up, what are you working on? What's kind of interesting? It's like, here, just see it.
It's right here. Go take a look real quick. And that's something that wasn't around a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to me. I was actually at Toronto, and Roger Ebert was in the audience of a movie that I was watching, and I happened to have a copy of Broken with me.
Yeah.
And because I was ready, he, it worked out that he liked it and watched it and reviewed it, without it being in the movie, in the festival. And that was about being prepared. That's still the most amazing. That's probably the most amazing thing that's ever happened in my filmmaking career. That and meeting George Lucas and getting him to autograph my Star Wars lunchbox, which I happen to have on me. That's
amazing.
That's a whole other story for another time.
Yeah, that is too cool.
So you were in this amazing documentary, Rewind This.
Yeah.
Which is, it's so awesome, man. I was watching it, and then you popped up. I'm like, Todd, what is it? Oh my God. I couldn't believe you were in it. And it was so much fun to watch. And I wanted you to, because, like you said, we're both of the same vintage. Can you talk a little bit? Well, first of all, do you have any VHSs in your film collection or Laserdiscs?
I've got a couple. I don't have a deck. I can't play them. But I've got this ridiculously limited edition clamshell of Beyond the Black Rainbow. I've got the Norwegian VHS of Norwegian Ninja.
Nice.
But those are because it's filmmakers that I know and that I have kind of an emotional attachment to.
Sure.
But very little. I'm not hugely nostalgic about memorabilia and stuff in general, as you might have gathered from my interview in that movie. I'm not that guy.
Right. Do you have any laser discs? We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
No, I never had a Laserdisc player, and there's a part of me that wishes I did because, man, I'd love to have that Criterion, the Killer Laserdisc.
Oh, I have that.
Yeah,
it's awesome, man. It is.
That's
really...
one of a kind of a small handful of titles that if I had a Laserdisc player, that would be why.
And they never released the Blu-ray, did they?
No,
they lost the rights, I guess, to it, or they didn't have the rights for that. Yeah, there's a bunch. I had in my heyday, I had probably about 100, 150 Laserdiscs, and most of them were all the Criterions because that's why I would buy them. And then slowly, believe it or not, I transferred them from Laserdiscs to DVD with commentary tracks.
That's cool.
Because I'm a geek. So I have stuff like that. Now, can you explain to the audience a little bit for the younger people in the audience, what was the real experience of that video store? How important walking into that video store is, the magic that video store is that they'll never have.
You never knew what you were going to walk out with is one thing. There was a certain degree of discovery, you would just go through, and it was just. I grew up in this town about an hour north of Toronto, which culturally is a wasteland. It's this place called Barrie, where when I was in high school, it would have been about 45,000 people. Mm-hmm. And the video store was your connection to the world. This was a super waspy, no culture, blue collar town. I went to high school with 1,300 kids, and in that high school, there were 2 black families and 3, maybe 4 Asian families, and everyone else was white.
Right.
Farm kids for the most part. So that was kind of your connection to the world. And you would just walk through, and it was this whole,
I know.
This whole sea of possibility. And you never knew what you were going to walk out with. And you'd kind of strike up relationships with the people behind the counter who had ridiculously exhaustive knowledge. And, as a more recent sort of example, during my college days, this store still exists, this place called Suspect Video in Toronto, which is amazing. And I was on this big David Lynch bin and going through and kind of renting all of Twin Peaks before the DVDs came out. And I was just chatting to the guy one day, and he just kind of looked at me out of the blue, and he's like, "Oh, I'll bet you'd appreciate this. Here, you should take this copy of Army of Darkness because this has the alternate ending on it." And I was like, alternate what?
What? Is there an alternate ending to Army of Darkness?
Yes, there is.
No. Where is this copy? You must send it to me. I must see this.
It got added to one of the zillion Anchor Bay DVDs. I think the Boomstick edition has it.
Okay.
But it wasn't available anywhere other than this super rare VHS. I forget which. There was one movie in particular that I was looking for. I can't remember what it was. I think it was some Lars von Trier thing.
Right.
It was. When I was on kind of a Lars kick, and I went in there and I asked him, "Do you have a copy of Europa?"
Oh yeah.
Because it wasn't they had this. They had a whole Lars section, and it wasn't in there. And no, we don't. And I went, "Oh, okay." And so I went and I looked at some other stuff, and then he calls me over. He's like, "Hey. Did that also get released in some places called Zentropa?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, here, I've got one back here that I found in a bin without a cover, and that's why it's not out there because we didn't have the cover to put out on the shelf." But I said to myself when I found it, "Oh, that's really rare. We should have that." And that's what a good video store was like. You had these people
magic.
who were, no matter how obsessive you were, they were even more so. And you would walk in and you could come out with just this crazy random stuff because somebody somewhere thought it was cool and felt like they had some sort of connection to you. And that experience is gone
Forever. It's this generation and the generations coming up behind us, they will never experience that. But at
the same time, I look at the way that my son interacts with media, and he has a whole different experience that we never had. And
correct.
There's a new kind of communal interaction that didn't exist. That honestly is a little bit foreign and weird to me, but it's every bit as valid to him as what my experience was to me. And who am I to say which one is better or which one's worse? But it's certainly really different.
Very, very different. I mean, I worked in a video store when I was in high school for 4 or 5 years. So I didn't go to high school for 5 years, but I stayed in afterwards when I was in college. But I just watched, I'd watch 4 or 5 movies a day. And while I was working the store, if no one was in, there was always a movie playing in the back, And then let's not get into Nintendo.
Yeah.
That's a whole other
for me, it was like in the college years, it was the trips down into Chinatown.
Mm-hmm. How cool. I already know where you're going with this.
Yeah, Toronto's got a massive Chinatown.
Sure.
And most of the stores were bootleg.
Of course.
I mean, it is what it is. You just couldn't get these things any other way. Like there weren't even options to order them in. But you'd go down and there'd be like these bootleg shops that were selling like 7 for $20. And I mean, that's how I saw most of my Wong Kar-wai stuff. That was my education in the Shaw Brothers. You just like pull these big swaths of stuff.
It was textile. You could actually hold it. You could, and the boxes.
It's that. I mean, I've fully made the transition now. I'm totally fine with digital content and digital media.
Sure.
But 100%, like especially music. I mean, at least 2 Tuesdays of the month, I would be in the record shop for New Release Tuesday. And I would usually have one thing in mind that was the thing that I wanted to buy, and I would walk out with like 5. And I was one of those guys that every single time, first listen, open the package, straight into the player, sit there with the packaging, read through all the liner notes from start to finish, read through all the lyrics from start to finish. And there was a whole ritual to media that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And I mean, the advantage is I have access to far more now than I ever did at any time.
Right.
I mean, that's the flip side of it. But the ritual part of it is gone.
Right. And those like going back to the video store, like those covers, those beautifully painted covers that promised you things that were never going to be in the movie.
Yeah, that was a whole art form that's lost.
I still remember Gator Bait.
It's not entirely lost. Like Mondo's trying to bring it back. That's the whole appeal of that whole.
Alamo Draft House is also they're really trying to bring all that stuff back, and they should, because it's just another choice, another way of consuming that media. But I do miss the video store, and I don't miss the video store. I do admit I love the options that you could just log on and I need to see that that Scorsese film when he was in college that he did. Okay, boom, and it's there. You know what I mean? Now it's like you don't have to hunt 15 stores to go get that, but the discovery aspect of things is gone. Yeah. That's the thing.
I completely agree. I mean, there was an aspect of that hunt.
Yeah,
that was part of the game. That was part of what made it satisfying when you actually found what you were looking for.
Right, and I worked in a mom and pop video store, so anytime I would walk into a Blockbuster, you'd be like, "Oh my God, they have everything." So Twitch Film's been around now for 11 years. What is keeping you going with that, and what are the plans for the future of Twitch?
I'm at the most basic level, I still do it because I like it. Okay. I don't particularly need to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's something that I started for my own satisfaction, and to a certain degree, I'm still doing it because I just still enjoy it. And there's this community of people that have been involved in it for a long time that are, you become a family. Right. And I'm very, very reluctant to give that up. In terms of future, we are in the process of a redevelopment right now. I'm not sure when it's going to roll out. I've become really very aware watching my own son, how radically different the online world is now than when I began. And we've effectively run the website the same way for the entire duration. I mean, some of the tool set has shifted a little bit and the design has shifted several times, but the basic kind of underlying philosophy and stuff has never changed. And what I'm looking at right now is certainly not abandoning.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Kind of the editorial aspect and the curatorial voice. We're going to hold on to that as hard as we can, pretty much forever. I think that's
what makes you. Yeah, that's what makes you what it's your secret sauce.
Yeah, but at the same time, we're looking to bring in. I watch kind of the generation, like Twitch exists the way it is because we grew up in conventional media, and it follows a traditional media format in terms of the way information flows through it and the way the audience interacts for the most part. And Will now, as a 14-year-old, like he's grown up in a fully broadband world, and that is not how they interact. It just isn't. And the idea of kind of the separation between writer and audience, or editorial and audience, does not exist for the broadband generation the same way that it does for us. And so we're looking for ways of really embracing that and building a lot of tools in that's going to continue to intelligently narrow that gap between, ultimately long-term, between the actual creators and the audience, and try to make that gap as narrow as it possibly can be.
Which is getting narrower and narrower every day.
Yeah.
Without question. So I've got 3 very hard-hitting questions for you. So Prepare yourself. Question 1, what makes a good film?
My first criteria when I'm judging something as a critic is I usually try to start with, what is this the movie that the director actually wanted to make? I don't think that like an art house movie is somehow inherently more valuable or better than a popcorn movie, by virtue of it being somehow more serious than the popcorn movie. But there are lots of bad art house movies and there are lots of bad kind of popcorn movies, but you have to judge them based on their own criteria. And so for me, a good movie is the movie that really satisfies its own set of goals in the strictures and the conventions of the world that it's working within.
Fair enough. Now, what are your top 3 favorite films of all time?
Well, we've already named 2 of them.
That would be Brazil,
and
Blade Runner, of course.
Man, the third one is kind of fluid. That depends where I'm at with stuff. I might want to throw The Goonies in. Is that?
I love The Goonies, man. Is it true they're making the sequel? Is that just BS?
Yeah, it seems to be.
Is it really? Because I saw it and because I've also read that they're making another season of Breaking Bad, so I don't believe the internet, but Richard Donner said it.
Donner's in, and the original cast is in, so it'll all come down to whether or not they get to arrive at a script that they all agree to.
Wow, oh, God, and that's basically our generation is going to just show up. Which is a pretty big generation, but still.
Probably, although my kids will totally show up. They've both watched it like 10 or 15 times.
That's true. You're right. It's such a great little movie, man. I do love The Goonies, man.
Yeah.
And then what's one of the most underrated films you've ever seen?
Oh, wow. Man, that's a good question. I wish I had a little bit of lead time on that. There's a lot of movies, and it's kind of underrated by whom.
Might have not been blockbusters. Might have been just like kind of got under the radar. You're like, hey, what? This is a really good film. Why didn't people see it? I mean, Shawshank was like that. Shawshank was kind of
Shawshank. Although Shawshank's one of the top-rated movies
now.
Yeah, I don't think he got. Yeah,
no, but now. At the now, it wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, The Thing tanked.
Oh God, it was.
Like, it was reviled when it came out.
Oh no, there was
and
like
I think
pitchforks.
one of the greatest films ever made.
Yep.
You know, if you're kind of to look at kind of my favorite filmmakers and kind of their little misfire movies,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for Gilliam, it's The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
I like that movie. That was I enjoyed that film.
P.T. Anderson's Punch Drunk Love. Here's a good one, and this is going to piss people off because I completely understand why people don't like this movie.
Right.
And any movie that requires, you know, a 3-volume graphic novel prequel just for the movie to make sense is deeply, deeply flawed. And I will never argue that this isn't a flawed movie.
Yes.
But man, I really like Southland Tales.
Wow, you are going to piss a lot of people off.
Yep. It's a bad movie, but it's a bad movie that I really like.
That's funny, man. That is funny. That's a great answer.
Throw The Fountain in there as well. I love The Fountain is legitimately a great film.
Oh, it's a masterpiece, I think. I loved it.
Partly that it completely plays to my own obsessions. I mean, I've got a degree in religious studies. I've got, you know, Jewish Kabbalah tattooed on my left arm.
Right.
So, you know, Aronofsky's obsessions and my obsessions are very, very similar.
Right.
I legitimately, you know, Southland, I understand the hate.
Yeah.
People who hate on The Fountain just missed it. They just completely misunderstood what it is, in my opinion, or they don't have a soul.
That's a very, very strong opinion, as it should be, sir. As it should be, sir. As it should be. I would expect nothing less. So where can people find you? Besides, I mean, whatever you want to say, Twitch and wherever else they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, Twitch. I'm still on Twitch almost every day, kind of writing and posting stuff. Otherwise, I'm pretty accessible. I barely use my Twitter, but it is there, and I do get kind of the tweets and stuff that are sent to me. You know, or kind of on the business side of things, it's just Todd at XYZFilms.com. I try to make myself pretty easy to find.
All right, Todd, thanks again, man. This has been an absolute joy. You know, two film geeks just, you know, talking about stuff. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Like I said, guys, two film geeks just geeking out over film. He's just a very interesting guy to talk to, Todd. And I hope his story is inspirational to you about going after what you want. And you never know where it leads, you know? You never know what, you know, starting, you know, a film website just because he loved movies has now turned into a full-time job for the last 10 years, as well as now finding new movies and talent and making your own movies through his production company and all sorts of fun stuff. So never give up on that dream, guys. Always keep fighting for that dream because you never know where it's going to lead. I have no idea where this is going to lead with Indie Film Hustle, but I love doing it every day, and I love helping out other filmmakers and helping the next generation coming up behind me and hopefully be able to make better films as we move forward. So, and if you want links to Todd and Twitch Film and all the cool stuff that he's doing, head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/045. And don't forget to head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave us an honest review for the show. It helps us out dramatically, guys. Thanks again so much for listening. I really hope you got something out of it. Keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. And I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.